Well, I'll tell you when Rebecca Grant emails you and says, "I have an idea for a podcast and I want to come on," we certainly set up the time and we get into this discussion. I'm so thankful today that you felt comfortable enough to reach out and also just inspired enough, to want to come on and discuss and talk about. Kind of a heavy subject, talking about divorce and weddings and grief in general. I just had an incredible get to know your wedding pro yesterday with Ernesto Lara. He's a big wedding DJ out of Yakima. And he, had almost lost his business this year, was transitioning to doing like drive-in movie things outside as a way to, you know, but he was like, I was a week away from losing my business. Right. And so, the stress is real. The grief is real. There's a lot of things going on. So, we're talking about divorce and kind of handling that and everything else in weddings and grief and all that. So, Rebecca, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll kind of get into this and see where we go.
Everyone, good to see you again. I'm Rebecca Grant. I'm the owner of New Creations Wedding Planning based out of Kirkland, and I'm the owner of Twin Willow Gardens Wedding Venue out of Snohomish, along with my husband Brian. And I'm also the vice president for WIPA Seattle, which is Wedding International Professional Association. And I'm also one of the founding members of WSWEA, which is Washington State Wedding and Events Advocates, fighting for the safe reopen of weddings here in Washington.
Yeah, and absolutely. I was going to say with that as well, literally had just gotten off a media call talking about those things and advocating those things. So very in tune with everything going on and certainly at the forefront of a lot of different stuff. So I guess what inspired you? You reached out last week. You said, this seems like a really pressing thing right now. I'm seeing this a lot online. What was the inspiration to talk about handling divorce and things like that in weddings?
Yeah, so I know this is a little bit heavier topic than what we typically talk about, but what I was noticing is just, being a part of several Facebook forums specific to the wedding industry online, I was noticing that a lot of conversations were coming up across the country of wedding vendors that were really struggling. Obviously, last year was a really incredibly stressful year, and it brought everything bubbled up in terms of things that possibly might not have been working well in your relationship already. It just exponentially added to that stress, and a lot of couples didn't make it. And I was seeing that people were really, really struggling with, how do I juggle the excitement for my couples and the excitement for guiding them through a marriage that you certainly hope lasts until the end of your days, as you're going through this incredibly sad and stressful and sometimes embarrassing phase in your life, and I just realized, having been through a divorce myself, that this is not talked about very much. And I was that person. Back in 2008, my ex-husband came out as gay. I was married to him for almost 8 years. We got married in 2000. And I was embarrassed. I was alone. At the time, I was living in Hawaii, and I was working as a wedding planner on Oahu. And here I'm trying to keep that life afloat of supporting my couples and being excited for them as I'm going through this devastating loss myself. My ex-husband was somebody that I have known since my freshman year of high school. We dated for many years. I felt like I knew him inside and out. And to have him come out as gay was like life altering. I mean, it just flipped my world upside down. And especially having, lived in Hawaii when I was going through all this, and my family was back here in Seattle, I just felt totally alone. And I do specifically remember going to grocery stores and to restaurants just so I could be around people and just so I could feel somewhat alive. I mean, I just felt like I had no one to turn to. I had no one to talk to. And I just really empathize with people that are going through this phase and this journey in their life, that you are not alone. I mean, I remember Google searching, husbands that come out as gay, and am I alone in this? And I know my situation is a little bit different than what a lot of couples go through, but I think regardless of your specific circumstance, the loneliness is real, and it's something that needs to be talked about.
Yeah, it's hard because weddings in general are different where when we show up, you really are on from from the get-go. It's really this all-consuming thing, and you don't really have a lot of time to process like other things that are going on, right? Obviously it's about the couple's day, but I mean, especially lately with dealing with the regulations. I know I've talked with Alan Chitlick a lot, friend of the podcast, about this too. It's really hard just in general to be excited about weddings right now, just across the board, just what's allowed this week, what's going on. I'm booking weddings for later this year. I'm like, is that going to happen? I don't know. And then to put on top of this, trying to manage, like you said, what could be perceived as an embarrassing thing, something maybe I think a lot of people look at it like they failed, right? Like I failed that, and so it is really hard, right? I mean, is that kind of where your similar thoughts about not that we have to perform when we're vendors, but you are like you can't show up and like have a crappy day when it's someone else's wedding, right?
100%. Even from a planner, you can't show up to planning meetings being disconnected. You have to be all in. You have to show up for your clients. They're hiring you to be the professional, to be that person that they can rely on to show up and be present and to be excited for them. And I mean, I remember wearing sunglasses to meetings because I was crying so hard just a couple hours earlier that my eyes were so bloodshot and so red. And trying to be present for them when you're going through your own personal hell is incredibly challenging. And it's not just on the divorce side. You brought up like last year going through basically overnight 90% of our income being wiped out overnight. You're trying to juggle, oh my gosh, here I am with my personal finances and my personal relationship, and do I need to get another job while managing all of your couples and trying to be supportive for them? And yes, I'm happy to reschedule your date, when inside you're just dying. And so it's very much of you don't want to feel like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but in a way that's kind of the position that you're automatically put in, and especially around divorce. It's when you're helping a couple get married and be excited about their wedding, you don't want them to see the could be, right? Like you don't want them to see this could be you in however many years. You want to be supportive that moving into this marriage is for a lifetime. And you truly go in thinking that it is, and that is certainly the hope for all of us. But as a vendor trying to be on that side of support and that side to show up and be present for them, it's incredibly challenging to be the happy, the excited, the yeah, definitely get married. It's great, type of thing. Because most of the time it is. But it's just a weird position to be put in. And I know that a lot of us really strive to be authentic in our relationships with our couples. And I know that's such a buzzword right now. But it's true. Like we don't do this job to become millionaires. Like none of us would have gone through the stress that we went through last year if we were just in it for the money. We truly love our couples and want to be a part of their day. But their life still happens, things that you go through still happen. And I think it's opening kind of behind the scenes ever so slightly to just share with your couples of, hey, this is what's going on, whether it be a divorce, whether it be the death in the family, whether it be a health prognosis or anything like that, but still letting them know I am here for you and I've got you. But I'm just going to be going through a little bit of something else on the side, So I don't think we need to be a full open book, but I think having that conversation with our couples is needed.
It's hard because, like I've gone to Wedding MBA a couple times, and that's, the big like Vegas doing the business of doing weddings and stuff. And that is their big thing is authenticity, post online, be yourself, let your couple in, your couples in and your other vendors and everything else. And so, we want to do that. But like you said, then it does come with, not every day, like, you're excited to get emails about, like you said, postponing or whatever. We just had a cancellation yesterday. 10 minutes later, I got to walk into a consult. And, I've said for a while now with everything going on and, we have stuff going on in personal life too, is like, I am glad in some ways that Best Made Videos is as established as it is now, because I couldn't even imagine trying to build a brand now, or build a referral base now. I mean, at least like some of that stuff is on autopilot, going into whatever now. But the other note I had on that is, it is challenging, like you said, when there's things going on in your life and you're trying to put up, a strong face. That we had one of our cancellations last month for the summer, and the criticism that I had gotten back from them was they didn't feel like I had checked in enough, kind of in the interim, and like we kind of did like the big check in, last year with everything. Okay, we get rescheduled. Okay, now it's like January. Okay, we're like 6 months out. And that's on me too. But it's like we need to have grace both ways there, because I'm like, there could have been a lot of stuff going on, where you're like you're trying to, manage 35, 40, whatever weddings. You're like, well, I didn't, is that my fault? Like, we were trying to, when can I have time off? I struggle with that with, being on emails and stuff. I know you do a really good job of like, setting the boundaries of like, okay, these are my days off. These are the days that I'm responding, because it's hard to be on all the time, when it comes to, because whenever your client is planning, that is when they want to plan and talk about their wedding, and they don't really necessarily care, what is going on for right or wrong, right?
Yep, for sure. Yeah, it's very true. I think that was one of the biggest things that, and why I'm so adamant in really protecting my Sunday and Monday weekend days off is because of having gone through my divorce and realizing, that I needed that time to process, just to be alone if I needed to not get out of bed if I needed to. And that was, I think, kind of the start of it. So it started back in like 2008 of me just saying, no, this time is mine. And that's the expectation from day one with my couples. Even at the consult, I remind them my days off are Sundays and Mondays. You will get my out of office. Feel free to do a brain dump, totally fine, but know that I am not going to get back to you until I am officially back in office. And I've been really successful at that. You know, it's just the expectation from the start, and everybody understands that.
The other note I had when you were talking about, having gone through and with the planning, that is always an interesting thing to me too, when, we're with a couple and they're getting married and, either one or both parents, have been separated. And so there always is that weird dichotomy too of like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, okay, well this, we're gonna, or, I mean, it's something, we live with. And I mean, how do you, I mean, you deal a lot more with like managing families and stuff. I mean, is that ever like things that are talked about where you've
Yeah.
had, okay, so feel free then, because I'm sure.
Yeah. So this is a question I ask at my initial consultations. I come right out and say, I want to know what I'm going to potentially be walking into on wedding day. So talk to me. Is there any family dynamics I need to be aware of? Are there any divorces in the family? Are there any deceased parents? Is there anything weird that I just should be 100% aware of prior to walking in on wedding day? And that does help me through the planning process to be able to specifically address, okay, so when we're talking about your seating assignments for the ceremony, specifically the front row where parents typically are in the seat of honor, right? What does that look like? Do we want to seat mom and dad together, or are they going to kill each other, and make it all about them and cause a little bit of an issue on wedding day? So these are conversations that it's really easy to forget about it because the couple's obviously living that life and going through it, on their side. But it's really important for them to open up to their wedding vendors and say, hey, you just should be aware of this dynamic, especially it goes across all sectors. Photographers need to know the family groupings, and they rely on their couples a lot for knowing those combinations that need to be put together, so that there are no weird things, and if it's a particularly strenuous or fresh divorce in the family, um, photographers need to know, okay, mom should not be put right after dad. Like, let's have a little bit of space between those photo groupings. And, that way they don't even have to cross paths. But, just all those silly little things that go across all sectors to just make sure, for florists, like, obviously, if one of the parents is remarried, does the step parent get a corsage or a boutonniere? And is that going to cause a major issue if they don't? Are they going to feel like they're not part of the family? Like, it's such a thing, that needs to be thought about carefully, and out of respect for everybody's emotions. You and I both know that weddings bring out the good or they bring out the bad. And emotions just get totally exponentially out of proportion on wedding days. And so just really thinking through, from the couple's perspective, what is going to be the easiest route of least resistance to make sure that it's a day that is exciting and wonderful for everybody.
Yeah, I think that it's a great point that whatever's normal to you in your life, it just needs to be conveyed to everybody else too, right? I mean, we just don't. I mean, like my father passed away when I was very young, right? And so that is normal to my family, right? But when you're talking with other people, and it's just not. And so when it comes to divorce, separation, if you have like adopted kids that feel what I mean, there's all these different dynamics, and so yeah, I think like definitely conveying that, having the planner, having someone, because ultimately, yeah, I mean, everyone wants it to be a wonderful experience. You don't know what you don't know sometimes. When it comes, to the vendor side, like and approaching these. So what is the advice then? I know you said you wanted to talk about reaching out, being getting help from. I mean, what are some advice? I think you had said before we started recording that you felt like having gone through this, having a little bit of separation, being able to look back and reflect on that. So and this is not specific to divorce. Grief of any kind right now is real across the board. We know vendors that have lost people to COVID. I mean, this is across the board. So how do you work through and how do you approach that?
So I will tell you, hands down, the biggest thing that tremendously helped me was faith and counseling. Those were literally the two things that got me through my divorce. And so while I was living on the island still, before I had moved back home to Seattle, I sought counseling from my church, and I wanted a biblical perspective. I wanted somebody that was going to pray over me. I didn't just want like, good luck, here's what you're going through, here's your stages of grief, like, thank you so much. I just really needed that for me. And so I know not everybody's that way, and that's okay, but seek counseling, seek help. Your friends will help you as much as they can, but they're not professional, trained, removed from the situation counselors. And that is one of the things that I realized, was that when I was reaching out to friends, they were friends with both of us. And so how do you navigate that, and how do you make them choose sides? And how I went through this, and I actually called up all of my ex-husband's friends and said, you were friends with him first, so if you need to pick a side, pick his, because I will be okay. I've got my friends that I've had since growing up that I can reach out to and have that support there. But their skill set is limited because they're not professional counselors. And so having somebody that you can share everything with, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything, and just be totally honest with that person, and have them see from an outsider's perspective looking in, to be able to help you with that small next step. And even if it is like, I am just going to try and get out of bed for an hour today, that's great. That is the small next step that you need to take for this phase in your life. But seeking outside help, 100%, I would not be here today. I'm actually seeking counseling from going through COVID. I am seeing a counselor on a regular basis. I see her every other week. And it's not because my marriage is falling apart. It's not because I'm stressed about finances. It was, oh my gosh, everything that I built my life around is crumbling around beside me. And the state is telling me I can't do my job. And how do I navigate that? And how do I navigate my couples? And so, counseling, in my opinion, is never a bad idea. But don't be too prideful. Don't be, again, embarrassed to go seek out help. Nobody needs to know. If you don't want to share it, that's okay. But just really seek out that third party. And again, like just seeing these Facebook forums, knowing some personal friends that have gone through divorces recently, I do feel like, having been so far removed from my divorce, my current husband and I will be celebrating our 11-year anniversary this May. And so divorce was a while ago, but the emotions are still fresh and they come back, and I can empathize and go through that with our fellow wedding vendors that are going through that. And I just want to know, I want to let them know that, like, being on the other side of this, you will make it. I know every day seems so hard right now, and there's some days that are better than others. Some days yeah, I can totally take on the world. And other days you're lucky if you get out of bed, So you will get through this. It is an incredibly difficult time. Seek the help that you need, and you will use this as part of your story. And you will use this as the fire that you're going through will make you stronger on the other side of it. And it has really, just a little bit about my background and my story. Like, I would not be where I am today had I not gone through that divorce. And I know that sounds like a weird thing, but having gotten started in Hawaii and working specifically with Asian and Pacific Islander weddings, that divorce moved me back to Seattle. And that's what, when I started networking here amongst wedding industry associations and whatnot, and going to networking meetings and realizing that nobody else had my background in Asian weddings, that was what launched my career here in Seattle, was Asian wedding specialist. And that would not have happened had I not moved back from Hawaii and gotten my start here. Um, it really just kind of gave me, honestly, like the kick in the butt that I can go do this on my own, and I can be successful. I didn't need to rely on my husband's job to make ends meet. In the long term, it was a good thing. I mean, I wouldn't wish divorce on anybody, but it's just amazing to see how everything bad turns and can come out good in your life, and make you a stronger person, and develop your character, and develop who you are, and develop what it looks like even in a career path too.
It's interesting when you were talking about reaching out, for counseling and getting that help. Friend of the podcast, Kelsey Knutson she's like a business coach. She was a hair stylist, and she just launched. I was just literally yesterday listening. She's starting her own podcast about kind of entrepreneurship and building a brand, and it's called When I Grow Up. But she was talking similarly about for business advice about. Uh, Getting help from people that are qualified to do that. And her analogy was, asking like your partner, right, maybe about business advice. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, like I could ask Dorothy about like business advice, and that's great, but like it's almost like unfair, puts her in an unfair situation, right? Because like she's not, a wedding vendor. Well, I mean, she can give moral support and all the other things, right? But you're almost setting them up to fail, asking people maybe that aren't the right. And like you said, talking to friends and things going through divorce is great to an extent, and to get that emotional support. But you do need to find somebody qualified, from a like a education, counseling, whatever, but also qualified just from being removed from that situation to be able to give that advice. So I thought that was a really interesting takeaway, because, obviously you want to go to like your friends, like, I need help, which is obviously, really helpful too. But, it's getting that outside qualified help too, I think, is interesting. I was going to say, I always felt like going through getting married made me a better vendor, because I had no, and also it's an age thing too, but I had no idea what it felt like to go through getting married. I felt like I was very unempathetic to kind of the situations of planning and stress and stuff. And and then when you go through it, then you're like, oh my god, that's why they weren't answering my emails, the week before the wedding, and that's why they felt like this and all that other stuff. Having gone through divorce on the other end of it, what knowledge has that helped you bring now back to weddings? Now that you're going through, and having been married again, but especially that divorce and the grief going through the weddings now.
Yeah, it definitely made me very empathetic to parents that have been divorced and what the couple might be experiencing, if especially if it was a fresh divorce while they were getting married. My parents were going through a divorce during my first marriage back in 2000, and so I remember the situation that put me in, and it's a weird thing. So I think empathy is a really big part of it, but also knowing like obviously you want to make sure that like the couple's making the right decision moving forward and whatnot. And I think just being able to share my story of if I don't share it with everybody, it's not something that I just blurt right out at the consultation, hey, I've been through a divorce, but just really having that conversation of yeah, I totally know what it feels like to feel like you're going into a forever, and I'm here for you throughout this entire process. And, I have had couples that have broken up. I've had three over my career that have broken up during the engagement. And I think those couples are honestly the ones that I feel the most connected to because it's like, that took guts, that took a lot of courage to break up before a marriage. And I would much rather you break up now than go through years of an unhappy or not the right fit marriage. And, I'm proud of you. Like, that's a really hard thing to get through and to come out knowing that you will be okay and you'll make it through this. Um, it's just such a weird, it's almost a taboo subject to talk about, especially around the world of weddings. And I think that we just need to be okay with like, life is weird and our plans don't always pan out the way we plan them to pan out. I for sure thought as a 20-year-old bride that had known this guy since high school and we bought our first house together at 19 years old. We were going to take over the world and certainly thought I was going to be married to him forever. And I just don't want there to be that embarrassment and that the recoil and the emotions that come along with that, like you said earlier, kind of that failure. And it's not. It's just bummer. Life didn't work out. Bah. Okay, let's move on though. Like we'll get through this, and who knows what is in my future.
Yeah, it's so hard, and especially and we're a part of 1% of a fraction of the life, right, of the couple, but it is, and I'm friends with a lot of brides and grooms and stuff on Instagram or whatever, and there's been times and I'll see a picture, I'll be like, that's not Tim with you, like what is
100%.
going
Yep.
on, and you're almost like it's weird, it's almost you're afraid to ask, you don't know, I email all my couples, on their anniversaries, and there is always kind of a fear, right? Is this, are they going to be broken up? Is everything going to be okay? But it's like you said, life is so weird. If nothing else right now, it's really taught us that, you know, I don't know, for better or worse, it's kind of a day by day thing a little bit. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard to plan stuff really far in advance right now. I mean, they talk about, I think, I heard it said a lot before with COVID and everything that the biggest thing it changed was planning, that you weren't able to plan anything, events, sports, weddings, movies, TV. I mean, everything across the board. And so it's, not that you want a normal size, grief or whatever, but I think that I don't know. It seems like we're all in a different spot now, maybe than we were a couple years ago. I don't know. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense at all?
Yeah, and you're actually very brave to reach out for anniversaries, because that's actually why I don't reach out for anniversaries. I never post an anniversary picture of like happy 1 year anniversary so and so and so and so on social media, specifically because of that. I have had couples that haven't made it to a year, and that's not very many, but still, like, I don't want to like rub salt in the wound, right? So I will absolutely repost a picture if a couple has posted on their social media, and I'm following them and I'm friends with them. I'll 100% repost that picture. But that's why I don't like keep track, and like I don't purposefully repost something. Um, yeah, because I just don't want to be putting them in that
It's hard.
position.
I
So
know. I
you're
know.
very brave to do
We'll see.
that.
We'll see. You have a lot more years of experience to learn, but I know it.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
well, and I feel like sometimes if it's a questionable one, I won't. I don't. It's not an automated thing. It's like, wow, okay, how are we feeling today? Are we feeling like they're going to be? No, I mean, but it's you don't know, and people get, it's so hard, and even like you know, these people they get married so young, and you change. I don't know. I mean, it's to think back to 24-year-old Reed or whatever, the 34. I mean, it's just like it's a lifetime. It feels like a lifetime ago, and especially now with everything we've gone on in the last year, it feels like a lifetime ago. So
For sure. Yes. And I remember being that 20-year-old Rebecca walking down the aisle and thinking it was going to be a forever. And I truly think it would have been had he not been gay, but kind of wish he would have told me that in the first place. But it was, yeah, I mean, and in looking back, I'm like, why in the world did my parents let me get married at 20 years old? Like, why did anybody let me do that? And it's okay to change, and I do think young marriages absolutely can work. I'm not saying that at all. I think short engagements can work, short times of getting to knowing that person can work, absolutely. But there's just definitely like, oh my gosh, I refer to it literally as my past life, because I just feel like it was almost on the decades, right? So 2000, here's this 20-year-old Rebecca, homeowner, business owner, getting married, great life. We owned 4 drive-through coffee stands at the time, and was living high, great income, great customers came through every day, wonderful vacations, just really enjoying life overall. He truly was my best friend, like we got along so well that it was just easy. It was an easy marriage. Everything was great. And then that day, and I'll share with you what that day looked like. It was Easter Sunday after church. We came back to our condo in Hawaii, and I I don't know if you believe in supernatural things, but holy moly, it was the weirdest experience of my life. We walked into our condo and the power was out. And it hadn't been windy. There was no storm, nothing. The power was just out. And we're like, well, that's kind of weird. And then he said, Rebecca, we need to talk. And out of my mouth, without a second thought, was, are you gay? And I remember then like, well, that was weird. Why did I say that? And it was just the weirdest experience of like, whoa, where did that come from? And he read me a letter that he had been writing for the past 6 months. And through that time, we tried to amicably go through the divorce. We actually lived together while we were going through the divorce. And then I just kept finding out lie after lie after lie. And, I'm like, you know what? I know we're trying to be friends through this process, but my friends don't lie to me. And you need to move out. And so I actually packed his suitcase and I told him he was not welcome to come back home. And that was kind of the end of it. I moved off island June 4th, and hadn't really ever looked back. Like the only communication that we had to have was going through the sale of our home. In Hawaii, he stopped paying the mortgage. And so we actually ended up going through a short sale, which of course then totally ruined my credit. But, again, you get through it. You get through those things, that drops off your credit 7 years later. And so here I am back to a normal person. But it was devastating to go through. And, through the transition from moving off Oahu back home to Seattle, going through the counseling, going through the recovery with my family, with my friends, meeting people. I started dating way, way faster than I thought I would. I got remarried way faster than I thought I would. There was a guy that I dated before my current husband, Brian, who was so much a piece of my life. I had actually known him from high school just for the short time we were dating. Um, he was put there truly to just reboost my confidence and to just be okay. Rebecca, you're going to be okay. Like, you're not going to die an old maid. You're not going to you're not going to be single forever if I don't want to be, and he was just such a boost of like exactly what I needed at that exact right time. And then meeting Brian and going through that whole dating process and realizing like, oh my gosh, this guy could be my next husband. Like, it's just a really interesting shift to go through. And the first couple of years of Brian and my marriage, I still continued to see a counselor because he was so different from my ex-husband that I'm just like, and Brian, if you've met him, he is like steady Eddie. Nothing phases that man. And he's just this like no high emotion, no low emotion. He just is like even keel. And that really upset me when we were first married because my ex-husband would be high with me, he'd be low with me. Everything that was exciting to him. Everything that was sad to him. And with Brian, I'm just like, where are you? Where's your emotions? And so I went to see a counselor because I'm like, I need to adjust how to live with someone else and how to live with someone new. And, here I'd been married for almost 8 years of my life and got divorced in 2008, remarried in 2010. So pretty quick, and it was definitely a learning curve for me of like, Rebecca, you got to reset your expectations and rework what you're going through. And so I saw a counselor for about 2 years into our marriage. And like I said, 11 years in May, I joke with my husband, we're at to the point where, oh, this is the 7-year mark. Are we going to make it? Just having those stupid conversations of like, okay, you've made it past my ex-husband. We're good. So, and then like, when the year 2020 rolled around, I'm like, oh, it's my time for the decades, like married when I was, in 2000, divorced in 2010 or remarried in 2010. And now we've hit 2020. So it's time for the new refresh, so it's to the point now where we joke about it and it's fine. It's not part of our everyday conversation by any means, but there's certain things that he can just totally push my buttons and make me laugh. And anyway, so everything's good, but it was definitely a weird process to go through for sure. And it definitely feels like my past life. It feels like something that I don't remember I was married in the past before, at times. So it's a weird thing. Like the more time and the more distance that goes by with what you've moved on with, the more it becomes just this tiny, tiny little glimmer of, yep, there's a little blurb in my background, but it's not, when you're in the thick of it, that's all you can think about. And that's all you can focus on. And when you have that distance and that perspective, it just becomes, yep, here it was. I survived. I made it.
Well, it's and like you said, it's weird, with that, feeling like past lives, and going back to COVID too, just, you know, everyone has this sense of like permanence, right? Like this is the way that things, like I spent, many, many years of my life in the TV news business, that was like the all consuming whatever, right? And now it's like, we're in this wedding thing, right? And who really knows, right? And then it could be, moving on. But yeah, it's people's lives are fluid like that
Mhm.
nowadays, and it's the same to go back to, to like when my father passed away, my mom they'd been together for 17 years, He died at 41, right, very young. And now to think like how much of my mom's life, in our life and my brother and I's, has we've all lived, well past, right, where he, has been passed away, right? It is like this whole separate world. It's like I don't even like know what that would be anymore, right? I mean, it is weird, like where you have gone through something and then changed in that way, and like yeah, it combines into who you are, right, in your story, but it is weird um to move on from that too, right, and to because in some regards, you want to move on, right, you want to move on with your life, but then also it's like that was part of your life. It's a really weird dichotomy to kind of go through.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then
it even popped up when my mom brought over some family pictures that she wanted me to sort and decide which ones I wanted, which ones went to my sister, which ones went to her. And in those photos were some of my first marriage's wedding photos. And it's a weird like stop and pause. Do I keep these because it was a part of my life, or do I get rid of them? And there was a couple that I set aside, and my husband now, Brian, he was seeing me do this. And he's like, if the tables were turned, you would freak out. If I kept photos of my ex-girlfriend or anything, you would be like, why are you keeping those? Why do you need those? And my automatic reaction was, well, I was married. It's different. This was part of my past life. And he's like, why is that different? I dated other women in my past life, and you wouldn't let me keep any of those photos. So how is it? And it was a really interesting conversation that came out of it, of I think I just ended up throwing everything back in the shoebox, and it's now in the corner of a house, and I haven't gone through it since. But I mean, he's absolutely right. He has a wonderful point of like, why in the world would you keep those photos when, my past girlfriends and my past life, you know, I don't keep any of those photos. So why would you be keeping ones of that relationship? I don't know. It was a really, really interesting thing to go through.
yeah, it's just it is, and I think it's different for each person, but it is tough to grapple with that keeping what has made you who you are, and then also moving on, or remember that I mean, in 10 years we could all be on Mars and doing other crazy stuff, but you know what I mean. It's like, but
Yeah.
I mean, and so it is such a weird just human thing, where it's like, we set this world around this, and my brother is so this way, where like, compulsive and OCD, and like this world that's around him is like this unshakable right thing of like whatever is going on right now. And it's really not, right? I mean, and if nothing else in the last year has taught us that, but yeah, being able to take these pieces along with us as we go, I think is important, but I also think you shouldn't dwell on your old girlfriends and
Yeah.
stuff, Brian. But
Right. Yeah. And that's 100% what I'm trying to remember about even last year of being COVID in 2020. And like I said, like our lives crumbling overnight, and you're so in the thick of it. And that's all you can focus on. And that's all consuming, right? It affects everything. You turn on the TV and that's what you hear. You turn on the radio, that's what you hear. Your couples are emailing you. We want to reschedule. We want to cancel. You're then trying to navigate through this of like, where do I fall in the mix of all this? And trying to have that perspective of this too shall pass, right? Of like, you will get through this. We will be looking back on this at some day, knowing that, oh my gosh, we survived and we made that. And we know, having seen venues close, having seen vendors have to shutter their doors through this, we know it's not going to look the same, but life is never the same. And we know that something potentially exponentially better could be coming out of this. And so, even if it's not in the same career, even if your business does have to shut down, which I know is devastating in and of itself, but it is something that could potentially be a stepping stone to something even better.
yeah, it's as we continue to try to get back to normal. Yeah, I mean, normal is going to look very different, and it's it's expedited things that were probably going to happen anyway in some industries, and in other ways, I think like weddings and stuff are going to try to get back. But yeah, it's a lot to grapple with, and especially when you're, to get back to the original kind of topic, where you're grappling with a lot, and then you're also trying to help these couples that are working through a lot. It is a weird, it's a lot, and especially certain vendors, obviously planners, photographers, DJs, the people that are really working with the couples the most. I mean, I'm there if they want to talk, but they don't. It's not like I'm getting pinged every day about like questions, right? But we're, especially the vendors that are working through like all of that stuff along with them. It's an exhausting process anyway, just to go through that on a normal day, right? And then especially then when you're trying to go through it. Uh, so yeah, I don't know, if the takeaway is everyone just needs to have more grace for everybody, and just understand that people are going through a lot, and especially when like we talked about, wanting to be open and honest and authentic and do all these, buzzwords and the 2020 thing and post online and everything, like there might be some crap some days, right? And you might not, not might be, in the best mood all the time to kind of manage everything. Sometimes it's hard.
Yeah, and I agree that your point of just having grace with everybody is, I think, one of the biggest things to try and remember on a day-to-day basis is everybody is going through something. Some people are just more vocal about it. And if you can just try and have that remembrance, of I'm not a patient person at all. Like my patience is very slim. That's not one of my attributes. But like even when I'm driving and somebody cuts me off, it's just like, okay, they could be trying to get to a hospital, to see a loved one or who knows what. And just even in those split second moments of the day that we have the choice, do I show that person grace or do I flip them off? Um, I'll share with you an experience that I just had actually at Ben Franklin Craft Store out here in Monroe. I I have not had great luck with their framing department. I'll just put it that way. And I know it's such a little thing. It's frames for pictures, right? No big deal. And I got up to the cashier and she rang up all my items and it was like $20 over what it should have been. And so I was like, wait a minute. And I literally was handing her my card and then I pulled it back and I was like, I'm sorry. I'm just quickly doing the math in my head. I'm trying to figure out how you got to that total because these say one price and you're charging me over. And she's like, oh gosh, oh, I'm so sorry. And then she was like, couldn't get the concept that I was trying to pay for 3 pieces, but only had 2 that I was physically checking out with because the third piece had to stay back in the frame shop so they could match it, just on and on and on. And my patience was gone. Like I was so frustrated with her. I was just like, okay, how can I say this easier, so that you understand what I'm trying to do and you understand where the price point is. And like, I wasn't mean, but I certainly wasn't nice. I was probably, came across probably a little rude, a little short. I drove all the way out to Marymore Dog Park, went to the dog park with my dogs, was thinking about this the entire drive and the entire time at the dog park. I actually drove back to Ben Franklin after the dog park and I apologized to that cashier because I was just like, I know that didn't start my day off super awesome. It probably didn't start your day off super great either. I'm sorry. I just wanted to apologize for the way I came across. But like, if I would have just had grace in the first place, I wouldn't have been thinking about that stupid one interaction for 3 hours, to the point where it made me drive back and apologize to her. So I don't know. I'm certainly not perfect. I'm still learning in that department myself, but just the more we can understand that everybody is truly at core, at the heart, does try and have the best interest for other people, I think that would go a really long way in our industry and in our society as a whole.
That's good. I think that's a good spot to leave it. I can't imagine what she thought when you came back in the door and was like, "Oh my god!" But no, I think that that's good. Not to make jokes here at the end, but no, I mean it's good. It's a heavy subject, but it is one that I think that we grapple with, and like you said, whether it's going through divorce or loss of business, or I mean anything else. I mean it's a lot of different stuff right now. We did uh who was it? Anne Marie and Jenny, Gigi, and Alan. We did a roundtable like grieving the wedding process and kind of talking about wanting to still get married and dealing with all this crap and everything else. So yeah, I mean, I do think it's good to talk about these things, and it's not always fun or easy, but I do think it's beneficial. So I appreciate you reaching out, and we could do this talk. It was good.
Absolutely. And I'm glad we covered it from both the couple's slight perspective as well as the vendor perspective, trying to support those couples. And just know you're not alone. You will make it. Seek out help. Those are the three biggest things that I can offer my advice for.
Well, I appreciate it so much. Again, like I said, that if Rebecca reaches out and says I got a topic for the podcast, we're gonna get on and set it up. So I appreciate it, and just continuing to have conversations every week about everything going on with this, I think is important to do. So I hope if people are still listening that you appreciate that, and we'll find another topic next week to talk about kind of in the world of weddings. So thank you so much, and I just feel free to share your information before we go. Because
Awesome.
I'll put everything on there. But yeah.
Thanks, Reed. So if you want to get a hold of me, my email address is info@newcreationsweddings.com, or you can visit me on my website at newcreationsweddings.com.
And very active on the Instagram, so that's good too. If you want to get
Many thanks to my virtual assistant.
Oh, well, thank you so much again, and check back next week for another fun topic. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Reed.